It's strange how a nation that today stands as one of the most advanced, stable, and influential countries in the world didn't even exist as a single country just a little over 150 years ago. When we look at Germany now, with its powerful economy, strong global presence, and unified identity, it's easy to assume it has always been this way. But behind that modern stability lies a time of chaotic borders, rival kings, jealous princes, and constant tension between people who spoke the same language but were divided by politics, culture, and pride. That alone raises unsettling questions. How did so many fragmented states, some big, most tiny, manage to come together when they had spent centuries fighting one another? How did a group of people with shared roots but different loyalties suddenly become one of the strongest nations in Europe? And why does the name of one single man, Otto von Bismarck, seem to overshadow everything else about this transformation? Could one man truly forge a nation out of pieces that didn't want to fit together? In this video, we are going to answer all these questions as we uncover the story of how Germany was unified not through dreams of democracy or ideals of peace, but through iron strategy, ruthless diplomacy, and a political genius who wrote the map of Europe with calculated moves that shocked the world. This is the story of how Bismarck redrew Europe. To understand how extraordinary this transformation was, you first need to imagine the German-speaking world before unification. Today, Germany looks like a solid mass on the map. But go back to the early 1800s, and the picture becomes almost comical. There were nearly 300 states-kingdoms, duchies, principalities, even tiny church-run territories, each with its own ruler, its own taxes, its own laws, its own army, and often its own ambitions. Some were powerful, like Prussia and Austria, but many were so small that you could walk across their territory in an hour. This chaotic patchwork was the legacy of the Holy Roman Empire, a political structure so complicated and ineffective that Napoleon famously called it neither holy, nor Roman, nor an empire. When Napoleon invaded and conquered these scattered states, he didn't just win battles, he shattered the illusion that these small states could survive on their own. And when he was defeated in 1815, the old map didn't return. Instead, Europe created a new arrangement, the German Confederation, a loose association of 39 states. It was meant to keep the peace, but really, it fueled rivalry. At the top of this new structure sat two powers, Austria, the traditional leader of German affairs, and Prussia, a rising military state with a hunger for expansion. This rivalry would shape everything that came next. Prussia had one clear advantage: a disciplined, well-trained army and a bureaucracy that valued efficiency over tradition. Austria, meanwhile, was a multi-ethnic empire constantly struggling to control its diverse populations. But Austria had prestige. It had been the leading German power for centuries. For Prussia to unify Germany under its control, it would have to defeat not just Austria's armies, but its influence, history, and legitimacy. This is where Otto von Bismarck enters the story. When he became the Prime Minister of Prussia in 1862, he saw the fractured German world not as a problem, but as an opportunity. Bismarck realized something that no one else had fully understood: German unification was possible, but only if someone was bold enough to force the process. He believed that speeches and democratic votes would never unite Germany, only power would. In one of his most famous lines, he declared that the great questions of the time would be decided not by speeches and majority decisions, but by iron and blood. Still, Bismarck wasn't simply a warmonger, as many accused him of being. He was a strategist who believed in choosing the right war at the right moment, never fighting unless the outcome was almost guaranteed. His plan for unification unfolded like a three-act play, each act involving a carefully engineered conflict that weakened Prussia's rivals, strengthened its position, and made unification seem not only desirable, but inevitable. The first conflict came with Denmark in 1864. The region Schleswig and Holstein were home to both German and Danish populations, and Denmark tried to absorb them completely. Bismarck seized on this as a perfect excuse. He formed a temporary alliance with Austria, surprising everyone, and together they defeated Denmark. But the victory was only the beginning. Bismarck deliberately created a situation in which Prussia and Austria would argue over how to govern the conquered territories. It was a trap, one that would eventually push Austria into a corner. That corner appeared in 1866 with the Austro-Prussian War, also called the 7 Weeks' War. While Austria struggled with internal issues and outdated military structures, Prussia had spent years modernizing its army with railroads, better rifles, and faster mobilization. When war finally came, the result was swift and decisive. Prussia crushed Austria at the Battle of Knigritz. But here, once again, Bismarck's brilliance appeared. Instead of destroying Austria or humiliating it too deeply, he offered surprisingly lenient peace terms. He didn't want Austria as an enemy forever. He simply wanted it out of German affairs. And he got exactly that. Austria withdrew, and Prussia reorganized the northern German states into the North German Confederation, a major step toward unity. But even with Austria out of the way, the German map was incomplete. The southern German states like Bavaria and Württemberg remained independent and suspicious of Prussia. They needed one final push, one event powerful enough to unite all German-speaking people under one flag, and Bismarck knew exactly how to create it. France under Emperor Napoleon III was already uneasy about Prussia's rising power. The growing influence of a unified German world threatened the balance of Europe. Napoleon III feared that, if the German states united under Prussia, France would be surrounded by powerful enemies and lose its dominance on the continent. This fear created the perfect opportunity for Bismarck, who understood something crucial. Nothing unites people faster than a common enemy. The immediate spark came from a seemingly small diplomatic issue: the question of who would become the next king of Spain. Spain had offered its throne to a distant relative of the Prussian king. France hated the idea. Napoleon III demanded guarantees from Prussia that the candidacy would never be revived. The Prussian king politely refused to make such a sweeping promise. When the French ambassador pressed him again at a spa town called Ems, the king's response was polite but firm. What happened next is one of the most brilliant and controversial political moves in European history. Bismarck took the king's message, the EMS dispatch, and edited it before releasing it to the press. He didn't change the facts, he changed the tone. The edited version made the French demands look insulting and unreasonable, and it made the Prussian king's refusal seem cold and dismissive. The French government felt humiliated, their pride was wounded, and in a world where national honor mattered as much as military strength, France took the bait exactly as Bismarck hoped. In July 1870, France declared war on Prussia. What France didn't realize was that Bismarck had already secured secret defense alliances with the southern German states. The moment France attacked, those states, Bavaria, Baden, Württemberg, and Hesse, rallied to Prussia's side. The very thing they feared, a Prussian-led Germany, became the only shield against a French invasion. Just like that, Bismarck had united all German-speaking people in a single cause: defeating France. The war that followed was shockingly one-sided. Prussia's army, despite France's confidence, was better organized, better equipped, and faster. The German forces used railroads efficiently, allowing troops to move rapidly. The French army, meanwhile, struggled with outdated command structures and poor planning. The decisive moment came at the Battle of Sedan in September 1870. Napoleon III himself was captured, along with tens of thousands of his soldiers. France's empire collapsed, and a new republic was declared. But even then, the war continued for months, with German forces laying siege to Paris. Inside France, the humiliation was unbearable. Outside France, Bismarck had achieved something unprecedented. The southern German states, having fought side by side with Prussia, were now ready to join a united nation. The last obstacle, French opposition, had been removed by the war. Then, on January 18, 1871, inside the glittering Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles, deep in the heart of conquered France, the German princes gathered to proclaim King Wilhelm of Prussia as the German emperor. It was a symbolic moment filled with triumph for Germany and deep humiliation for France. A new empire had been born, not through grand speeches or peaceful negotiations, but through carefully engineered conflicts. diplomatic manipulation, and strategic brilliance. The unification of Germany was complete, but this is where the story becomes even more interesting. Because while Bismarck had successfully created a powerful empire, the consequences of his actions would shape Europe in ways he could not fully control. The newly unified Germany was an industrial powerhouse. Its population was large, its economy growing rapidly, and its military unmatched in just a few decades. It became one of the strongest nations in the world, but that rapid rise created fear among its neighbors. France never forgot the humiliation of 1871. Austria watched nervously from the south. Russia was cautious, and Britain, always focused on maintaining balance, began to see Germany as a growing threat. The very method that Bismarck used to unify Germany war had created a nation whose identity was built on military strength and national pride. Bismarck himself understood how dangerous this was. After unification, he spent the rest of his career preventing wars, building alliances, and isolating France diplomatically. His goal shifted from expansion to preservation. He wanted to keep peace in Europe by ensuring Germany was always protected but never aggressive. However, after Bismarck was dismissed by the new Kaiser Wilhelm II, Germany's leadership changed course. They abandoned Bismarck's careful diplomacy and pursued a more assertive, imperialistic foreign policy. The nation that had once been united through iron and blood now embraced the idea of becoming a global empire competing with Britain, France, and Russia for colonies, prestige, and power. This shift contributed to rising tensions across Europe. Rivalries deepened, alliances hardened, and the continent slowly edged toward the catastrophic conflict that would become World War I. Many historians argue that without the unification of Germany, the First World War might never have happened, or at least would have looked very different. The powerful German Empire, forged by Bismarck, created a new balance of power in Europe, one that was both impressive and unstable. But despite the long-term consequences, the achievement of German unification remains one of the most dramatic political transformations in modern history. It was the creation of a nation that would dominate European affairs for generations. It turned Germany from a fractured collection of states into a single, unified power. And it demonstrated the extraordinary influence of one visionary leader, whose strategic mind could manipulate diplomacy, war, and even public emotion to reshape a continent. What makes the story even more compelling is that Germany's unification wasn't inevitable. It wasn't the result of a grand popular movement or centuries-old plan. It happened because the moment was right, the circumstances aligned, and Bismarck knew exactly how to use them. He resolved internal conflicts, weakened rivals, and turned external threats into unifying forces. He balanced ambition with restraint, aggression with diplomacy, and nationalism with political realism. And above all, he understood the psychology of states: when to provoke, when to compromise, and when to draw the sword. In the end, Germany emerged not just as a unified country, but as a symbol of how power, intelligence, and timing can rewrite geography. The unification of Germany shows us something universal. Nations are not just born, they are built, carefully, brutally, and often, through the vision of a single individual who sees what others cannot. And that is how Otto von Bismarck, through iron and calculation, redrew Europe.